winter solstice as well, as we're about to enter this long dark night. Maybe we'll see a good show of the stars as well. But I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and put the agenda up. That. Let's see. Sorry, I'm a little slow about this. Let's see. All right, can you guys see my screen now? I did it. Okay, yes. Fantastic. All right, well, thank you, everybody. And so here's the agenda. But actually, before we start on this, I had the opportunity to talk to Leah earlier this week, and she's been doing a lot of work on the corridor project, wildlife corridor project. And I know that was kind of it was sort of tagged on to our list of goals. But she was thinking, and I agree with her, is perhaps having a third subcommittee that would be focused really on the corridor project, and it's getting some great traction, and a lot of really good movement there. So, we could talk more about this at our full meeting, but I just want to sort of put that out there, especially for anybody on this subcommittee who would like to join Leah and really get focused in on the wildlife corridor project. And I don't know if Leah, if you want to add anything about that, or did I sum it up well enough?
You did fine. I didn't have a chance to write the charter. I had a little mess up with some things the last few days, so I've been absorbed, but I will get that put together. And I mean, Kim's been doing huge amounts of work on the project, and so I just don't want Kim to have to necessarily go to yet another meeting, but since the wildlife corridor activity may be increasing some, I wouldn't want it to take too much time out of the education meeting. And also, I'm just trying to figure out the most efficient way to manage it.
Yeah, so if you guys have any thoughts on that, or if you would like to join Leah, think about that, kind of put it in the back of your head, and we will revisit it again at our full meeting. So, okay.
And maybe Kim, I can talk to you offline too, see what you think.
Yeah, and if it's only one other person with Leah, then it could be a smaller, more informal setting than doing a public meeting. So that's another option to consider.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. All right.
Our Zoom meeting shorter.
Yeah. So thank you, Emily, you provided some feedback for the landowner program tool, and I think you were the only one actually. So I don't know if there's anybody who feels the need to contribute to that document that Leah created, and if you've had a chance. Otherwise, perhaps we could have Kim send that feedback on. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts about that.
Yeah, when we were talking about it last time, it seemed like maybe people who had looked at other properties were pulling up slightly different information to look at. I did pull up another piece of property and felt like I was seeing sort of the same thing. So I didn't have anything further to add. I didn't know how valuable it was for me to keep trying different properties just to see if I got sort of a different set of recommendations. So anyway, and most of the things I had to say were sort of broader, like just sort of like, hey, I think you ought to reorganize so that you make clear these links are education and these ones are actually if you're trying to get to programs. So, I'm happy enough with what I put on there. I don't at the moment feel like it needs a lot more of my time, but
yep. Yeah, thanks, Emily. I feel remiss because I never actually went back and did the work that I said I was going to do. So I could still try to do that and take another look and make some additions. But to be honest, I haven't. So, but if there's anybody else who feels like the need to do that, speak up now. All right. Well, thank you for doing it, nevertheless, because I think it will be good. And I think it will be a good tool, and I think the feedback will be useful as well.
So Christine, do you want to add to it and then let me know when you're done?
I will
we'll
add
send it
to
out?
it,
Okay.
and then I will send it off to you.
Okay.
How's that sound,
Sounds
Kim?
good.
All
Perfect.
right, great. And so I put the Park Ambassador Program down just because I wanted to report that I had participated in these two, like the Nature Conservancy has a program right now, and they have an AmeriCorps volunteer, and they're doing some invasive plant removal. You guys might already be familiar with the work that Nature Conservancy does with the stream cleanup. And I just happened to join, it was an invasive plant removal at this little pocket park near Fry Springs Beach Club. And so, you know, it was just, there were two volunteers in the AmeriCorps volunteer there, but, you know, they had the tools and they gave a little talk, and we were cutting kudzu, and they were actually going to have a city parks person come behind. It was sort of questionable because it was quite cold that day, whether it was effective to apply any herbicide, but apparently oftentimes the city park employee would come behind and apply the herbicide. And so that was sort of how they dealt with the application of herbicide. But yeah, but it was fun, and you know, you get the tools there, and you know, perhaps it would be worth reaching out to the Nature Conservancy and saying, oh, well, we've got one of our county parks that could, you know, we'd love to tag on with you with your volunteers, because apparently they have plenty of volunteers. And they're also doing autumn olive invasive plant removal over at Ragged Mountain as well. So I thought that was an interesting model, and perhaps some of you have also participated in these. And I also did some tree planting with the James River Association, you know, and they just had people out there wearing their masks, and looked like they had lots of volunteers. So I just wanted to report back on that, that I've been looking at some different models and trying to participate in them as well.
And Christine, we talked about this earlier, but so I've been working with Parks and Rec to create this kind of a guidance document for volunteers working in county parks. And it started with Rod from the Prism kind of urging us to, you know, move towards something that would help with facilitating these kinds of things. And so it's very, very close. I met with Parks and Rec, and they had other people from Facilities Environmental Services and the environmental manager reviewing it. So I'm just waiting for the final approval before I can share it with all of you. But until then, if there are any volunteer efforts in parks, we can just coordinate with Jim Barber, who's the acting superintendent.
Yeah.
So just let me know, I guess, and I can coordinate with him.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll have to think about that, you know, especially for, you know, are there, what for the springtime and developing that program. And I actually skipped number 2, and that was the outreach to landowners in the conservation focus areas in preparation for the spring webinar. And Kim and I talked earlier because she's going to be working this spring on the spring stream health initiative, and this idea of sending out postcards. And it sounds like it is a bit pricey. She was telling me $1 a piece for the postcard once they're printed, and the postage as well. But she did share a couple different ideas about, how to do that outreach. And so I think for us to think about how we can do it, using outlets that are already available, perhaps. Maybe the possibility of reaching out to like a Ruritan club, or posting a flyer at the country stores, some other methods of reaching out to let people know that this webinar is going to be available in the spring. And so how to reach out to landowners and get their attention. Yes, Emily.
Yeah, it seems like there ought to be some other methods. If we're talking about, like, I see you say Ravenna corridor, so I'm thinking like, oh, well, there's some substantial neighborhoods, like there's Key West. Like they probably, in addition to having like a sports club or whatever, which may or may not be very active, that building right now, but they are likely to have some sort of like newsletter or something that goes out, right? Like I live up in the sort of Prophet Road area, and I'm in Benavar, and we have sort of, even though we don't even have HOA dues, right? Like it's very low key in that sense, but there is somebody who's organized, who sends out like a newsletter, like, a few times a year with some information that's valuable. And there's a larger sort of Prophet Road area email list where we have like an annual picnic, and stuff goes out over this email list that's relevant to people in our area. So maybe we can tap into things like that too.
I love that idea. And it makes me also think that maybe would there be value in having two different webinars, one that is focused more for people who live in the urban ring. They're living in these communities where they have like just a 1 or 2 acre lot, or less than 1 acre, like Key West or the Mill Creek area, where they're really not, they have a different set of sort of land management issues than somebody who's managing a farm or 100 acres. What do you guys think about that?
I have a question related to that that's maybe even a little bit broader, Christine.
Yeah.
There's so many great and important environmental or ecological concepts to educate people about. What are we wanting to focus on specifically? And then, like you're kind of saying, who's the target audience? Is it small landowners? Is it large landowners? Because there's a number of people in organizations that already send out emails to more rural area, larger property landowners that we could piggyback on. And then it sounds like Emily and some others have good ideas for small properties. But there are maybe two different audiences with two different needs.
I think so. And I think that you're so right. And one of my favorite publications is this publication that was put out by PEC. And what's really nice about it is it does talk about different types of agricultural habitat, and then it goes all the way down. I think at the very end of it, it focuses on there's some grasslands, shrublands, and then they have at the very end, I think it talks about just like backyard habitat. And so I think you are right about that. Where is the need the greatest? Where should we start? And I agree that there are organizations doing this. And do you think, is it repetitive? Or, I think there were 2 goals in mind. One is to make people aware of, can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. One of the things that we've talked about is making people aware of the Natural Heritage Committee and the BAP. And that that's one goal right there. And then the other goal perhaps would be how to be a better steward of your land here, and better landowner steward. And you're right, so there are these different categories. There's the agricultural landowner, there's the person who lives in a forest, and then there's the small person who's just managing their yard.
And just to add on to what you said, Christine, another thing we had talked about with this was focusing on making folks aware of the cost share programs that are available, and also conservation programs like the conservation easement programs. And so that's another component. So maybe that's also a separate topic, or it could be tied into the stewardship topic, but.
Yeah. And I almost feel like there could be just really two categories. The one webinar could be focused more for the people living in the developed area. And I think reaching out to the homeowners association is really a great idea. You know, people who are interested in managing their suburban habitat for wildlife. And then also providing a little bit of education. How does your development fit in with, let's say, the Rivanna corridor, right? And how does what you do have an impact on this particular place? And how does it relate? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I think, yeah, you have an opportunity to get people in those areas and neighborhoods like aware of it, and maybe aware that their neighbors are interested, right? Like, I mean, I know we're not going to drill down to neighborhood specific, but even just knowing, like, you know, the people who own at the end of Benavar here, it's called the Forks, where they have the North Fork and the South Fork of the Rivanna, the confluence there, and their land is in between, and they have it under conservation with the Nature Conservancy and stuff. You know, even people just sort of seeing maps and being aware of, oh, wait, there's land even in my neighborhood, right? Because this neighborhood has everything from sort of 2 acres to, I don't know how many they have, maybe 50, I don't know. But, you know, like, it's a big spread, but like, just even knowing, like, hey, there's people who care about these things, who are managing their land and have conservation easements in my area, right?
Yeah.
You know, might be interesting if people had the tools and the know-how from attending a webinar or something, just to even look at a map for their area and see those kinds of things, and maybe connect with neighbors and say, oh gosh, you know, those people know about this.
Yeah, no, I think that that's a great idea. And I mean, part of me feels like actually starting with the suburban ring, or if we looked at just the Rivanna corridor and we just focused on some of those developments in the Rivanna corridor in that watershed, and we just, that would be our first webinar, perhaps. And, you know, reaching out to the HOAs. I mean, I think even like the gardening centers that serve some of those neighborhoods as well. Maybe, you know, and we, you know, now would be the time to begin sort of planning for that first one. And then perhaps the second one that would be more focused on the large landowners with the cost share features. What do you guys think?
I have a question about, do you all want it to be webinar, or if it's not going to be until, I mean, I think we're talking spring, but if it's not till, if realistically doesn't get put together until and publicized till summer, you could maybe even do it in some of the HOA clubhouses and have materials available, flyers for people to pick up. I'm just thinking, because there's so much talk about people getting burned out with Zoom calls and webinars and distance everything. And I think when COVID breaks or there's enough vaccines out there, people are going to be anxious to get out, and they're going to be going to anything and everything. Just a thought.
I think the great thing about, you know, if we can build a presentation, then you can do it in person or you can do it over Zoom. as well. And, you're only going to get so many people probably initially, but there's always that second pass post-COVID that perhaps, we could say, like you say, Leah, in the summertime when things calm down and say, oh, well, we'd really love to go to your HOA and offer this presentation.
Okay, so I think you're saying start with the webinar and then modify it to do smaller multiple presentations, perhaps in small communities.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here's another thing or two to think about. I recently was talking to Serena with this big stream health project that I'm working on. And one thing that CAPE is doing now is these she calls it lunch and learn. So it's basically just an hour recorded presentation that it could be a webinar format with a Q&A at the end, or it could be just a lunch and learn hour that is scheduled on the county calendar. So people it can be promoted, at the country stores or however you want to promote it. And then since it's recorded, it can also just be saved and linked to from the Heritage website, and people can watch it later. I continue to watch it. So just throw that out there as an option. It's sort of a really easy first go, and then could build up to bigger events in the future. And then the other thing is the James River Consortium does these really cool Bmp Site Tours where they organize people, and they've even done it during COVID with just, everybody, it's outside, so everybody's distanced and masked. But even if it's just thinking about this for the future, that if Christine, at your property or somewhere where people have good examples of stewardship, or if landowners who are doing good things that would be willing to let a group of people walk around and see it in person, you could lead something like a Bmp site tour.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, maybe Bel Air Farm would be a great a place to do something like that, where they've been working with Virginia Working Landscapes and have been really successful in improving their bird habitat.
That would be the perfect place for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Cool.
So I have a quick question, particularly for dealing with the sort of more developed areas. Do we want to look, since those programs will be less focused on the conservation cost sharing programs, do we want to consider partnering with other organizations that, like Master Natural, the Natural Master Gardeners, and some of the other PRISM and some of the other groups that will clearly have also kind of interest in the kind of the backyard management issues, and that could also expand the audience as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. So PRISM for sure, right? Who else would you recommend? I'm trying to think that has strong programs like that.
Well, there are the tree stewards,
Stewards.
focus on stuff, and again, sort of focusing on home management. I don't know whether I'm sure that there's some folks who would be looking at, if we're going to look particularly at the Rivanna corridor as kind of a connecting feature of at least these first places we want to roll out, we need to talk about the stream shed. And
Right.
I'm sure there are groups here that can kind of talk about, putting part of this is, we think of all of our backyards as fragmented pieces of property, and what we miss is how they are part of the bigger picture. So folks who are involved with stream health and stream monitoring and wildlife should all be, a part of that. And again, there could be, I'm not as familiar with the groups around as others, but it would seem to me that there's opportunities to do some partnership here with local environmental groups.
Right. The Rivanna Conservation Alliance would be the one who,
Right.
in our area, focuses on stream health and and does a lot of water testing and submits their stuff to the, the EPA and stuff. So yeah, I agree that getting people to be thinking about that and thinking about their watershed would be important.
How do you think that the logistics of something like that would work in terms of, like, would it be, you would, in terms of like building a slide deck, and like, would you invite them to, people from PRISM, to have a little, to come in and say a couple words, or would we simply promote the work of those organizations without necessarily having a representative there in the webinar?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, obviously, the more people you want to bring in, the more people will want to participate in making a presentation for their own organization's interests. So you kind of lose some control over it. But it still seems to me it's worth, considering, in part because we could also use these groups to help get the word out and help promote the webinar as well. And it could be, that once we do this is a resource that we could obviously make available so other people could go back and look at it later on. So even if it runs a little longer than we might otherwise think, if it's an hour, I think we would probably need to sit down with some of these groups and try to figure out what is the kind of overall program that we could put together in a say an hour format.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think if I'm really, I know, kind of stuck on this idea, but I'm thinking along the lines of the lunch and learn hour. Again, if you have different topics, like I could see, Rod Walker from the PRISM has talked to us before about doing an invasives training. So if we wanted to do 1 hour lunch and learn about invasives with the Natural Heritage Committee and invite the PRISM, it could be a live Q&A, at the end, and then it's recorded. We can link to it people can watch it later and, learn about invasives management and how to ID invasives or whatever the topic is, but maybe breaking it down into discrete topics would help.
Yeah, I like that idea. So the possibility of, I wonder how many we can get though, Kim, do you think we could get 3 or 4 where the first one could be like an overview of the BAP, and this is, you're part of the, this conservation corridor, which includes the Rivanna River, and the things that we care about in this area would be managing invasive plants, or having landscaping your backyard to attract wildlife or support wildlife. If we kind of have our bullet points, and then the next time, and you can look forward to the next lunch and learn where we're going to really focus on invasive plants. And then the next one, you'll be able to learn more about the Rivanna River through the Rivanna Conservation Alliance. What do you guys, was that what you think along those? I like that idea, because then you're not squeezing so much.
Right.
And then you like give each of those organizations kind of an opportunity to create their own message, and it's a little less cumbersome. You're kind of inviting them in,
right,
to give.
I think that makes a lot of I think that makes a lot of sense, because I mean, it seems I think that solves some of the problems, but again, I think for our purposes, the idea of starting with this kind of overview of explaining to people, because that's, I think, what people, particularly, in the more developed areas, don't really understand, that they are in fact part of this system, and understanding the overview of that context. And from that, then they can go into kind of the specifics of looking at invasives or habitat for diversity, or lighting. I mean, even we could stop putting the floodlights on your houses or things like that. So that way, I think we could And I think that would be fairly easy to organize. I mean, to have, because all of those experts are going to have decks on these things sort of already prepared. And so that in a sense, we get to do the first one. And then we can bring in folks to kind of talk about some of these specific issues within the overall context that we've presented.
Yeah, and maybe we could even, the participants in the first, if we, hopefully we get some first participants, but you could even have
Yeah.
like a little poll afterwards and say, we could set that maybe the first two and maybe the third one, we could leave a little bit open and say, are you interested in how to care for the trees in your backyard, or kind of find out where people's interests are as well. Because for me, like, I think definitely having the prison come in, I'm really interested in like thinking about how you deal with your mowing your lawn and what you plant in your backyards, and these little tips for improving your backyard habitat. And maybe the PEC has got, maybe they'd be a good one to reach out for that, unless you guys have a better idea or you have a better suggestion of who would be a good organization for that piece. For the backyard wildlife habitat.
I think PEC, probably because, Celia, she does the plant Northern Piedmont's native, Northern Native Piedmont. I forget.
Yeah.
Long name, but you know what I'm talking about.
Holistic. Yeah.
And Beth Mizell is the other person who's leading that effort. She works for the Prism now. So she might be a good person to contact, actually. I can connect you with her if you don't know her.
Oh, yeah. I don't. That would be great.
What about the Piedmont Bird Club? I think that's their name now. There used to be Monticello Bird Club. There's, they want more bird habitat. That's their whole purpose, is to see birds. And I'm a little, because I'm new, I'm not real clear on, maybe Michael touched on it, what the driving focus is for the webinar, other than to bring more knowledge about managing land. Is there some specifics that I just don't know about, or I'm trying to pull it together while I'm listening, but I wonder if there's something more you could point me to.
I'm thinking it is about being a good steward of your land and how you can manage it for wildlife, and our goal to protect and promote biodiversity in Albemarle County. So yeah, I think that is the goal here, and to connect people with tools for raising awareness, and connect people with tools for doing that.
Yeah, and just for some background, Bruce, I think, we have these conservation focus areas and stuff that are defined in the BAP and stuff. And I think at least the initial discussion came out of trying to potentially reach out to landowners with more information about conservation opportunities and, what they could do with their land and stuff. I think it's just the targeting of those specific people is difficult. And I don't know if you caught the beginning when I guess Christine said that sending postcards, individualized postcards, would be even $1 a piece to send to people. So I don't know. So I feel like we're kind of merging, like growing this, and I think that the ideas we've come up with are great. But yeah, I don't know if we're still trying to target, like in the agenda, it was like the Ravenna corridor, which is one of our sort of conservation focus areas. And I don't know if we're still talking about like doing a specific outreach to those folks, or whether this is just a broader idea on how to educate people now. I think you could go either way. I mean, if you were trying to hit the Ravenna corridor, obviously, I think you want a big emphasis on the watershed then, and what, you know, how people connect to that, and how their land is connected to that. But anyway, that's just a little bit of, I think, maybe the little bit of the background.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. And you're right. You know, as we talk more about, initially we were really thinking about the large landowners and conservate, how they could get them connected with conservation programs. But so those are the kind of the two different places that we could focus our energy. I'm sorry if I'm being scattered, but I think that like there are two different needs, right? And but also if we did have the possibility of a lunch and learn, there could be one that's focused on those large landowners, but it's like, how do you advertise them? How do you let them know that this is available? I guess that was my first question, how to reach out to them and to bring them in.
There's a lot of ways to reach out to the large landowners. I think that they're already, well, anyway, I think there's some ways we can piggyback on, and I can help with that. But I like the idea of starting with, if we're going to focus on the Rivanna corridor, I would assume it would be good to start with smaller landowners, or focusing on simpler things like you're talking about, backyard activities, and just letting them know about the BAP and things like that. I mean, that's big, I think.
And that corridor is pretty urban. You know, there's a lot of development.
But a lot of people have backyard areas, even if they have larger pieces of property, they still put up the bird boxes and they want to do the backyard habitat piece. And
yeah, absolutely.
Another option could be also if you reach out more broadly with something like a lunch and learn, and then if we talk about the VAP and the conservation focus areas, you could say, you know, if you live in one of these areas and are interested in learning more, you know, contact us, or, you know, here's an email or something, and then try to catch some people that way who might be in those focused areas. But
yeah, that sounds great. So the next step for that would be, so Kim, you already have like a slideshow with that talks about the BAP, right? And so you have that deck already created for like initially. And so
and we have a I have to follow up, I guess. We had been asked by the Monticello Bird Club, or did we reach out to them? I can't remember, to give a talk to them. So that's planned for February, I think.
Yeah. So
about the NHC and the BAP.
And Kim, I'd be happy to do that. We could do that together, or and then kind of give it a test run with the Bird Club.
Yeah, and then if you want to go the direction of, I mean, just this, because of COVID, it's a little difficult to plan bigger events right now, but if you wanted to go the route of doing these sort of focused topics for an hour, and getting them on the county calendar, and having Cape kind of push out an announcement about it, I think that could be like, we could just plan one at a time and then see how it goes.
I think that's great, because if we could get a date, then that could be a job that the rest of us could do in terms of reaching out to the HOAs and see if we can get a little blurb in their newsletter about the event. What do you guys think? And we could like take a map and we can like divide up all the, you know, do our little campaign advertising blitz.
Right. Yeah, there are lots of neighborhoods, right? I mean, I'm just thinking the other side of Ravenna over here, you've got Carsbrook and you've got the Spring something, whatever it calls itself. And then you've got Belvedere and you've got Dunlora. And I mean, there are a lot of these neighborhoods that probably range anywhere from sort of a quarter to a half acre to neighborhoods that have anything between 2 and 20 something acres, but there are a lot of them on both sides, at least the north side where I'm more familiar with it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So for the next step, Kim, of course, we're not supposed to be giving Kim any more jobs,
Yeah.
but I could reach out to Serena, I don't know, and to say, we want to do a lunch and learn, we want to do a webinar. This is the day that we want to, like, when can we do it this spring, and can we get on the calendar?
Yeah.
And it's going to be an introduction to the BAP and the conservation areas. Do we want to just focus right now on the Rivanna conservation? I mean, that seems like it's big enough. What do you,
I think
yeah, go
I
ahead.
think that makes sense because it's sort of an organizing principle. It's not something that's so general that that people will not tune in if they think this affects them because it's their place. Again, this kind of place-based idea, I think that has a lot more compelling features for folks to tune in.
Yeah.
I agree. And I was wondering, I don't know where these emails go out. I don't think that I've heard about Lunch and Learns yet. I know that I'm on at least one of the county lists, and there might be many. I'm at least on one. And I must say that, like, I didn't join it until relatively recently. And I've been like, oh, because we bought some land out near Crozet, and I'm like, oh my gosh, no, I want to attend this meeting. Like, Ann Malik's holding an open house, or there's a meeting about Beaver Creek Reservoir, or there's, like those kinds of things have come up. And for me, that's definitely been a good source. So I don't know, I don't know who exactly those email lists are reaching and which ones this Lunch and Learn appears on, but we definitely should try to make use of those. It's reaching me.
Yeah, I don't know that it exists yet. The concept of a lunch and learn exists. I think that they did stuff like that with some of the public outreach projects, like for Albemarle's Court Square and the
Okay.
the climate action plan. So, and that's where the context of it came up, was the Stream Health Initiative that I'm working on right now. So the only caution I have with splitting out different areas like the Rivanna corridor is that means that I, or whoever is doing this, will be doing this, 5 times or 6 times instead of once. Basically repeating the same thing. So I'm not sure. I don't know. I guess I think maybe we just think about that strategically in terms of, at least I need to, at least in terms of my time.
Well, we've got, there are just 3 of them though, right? The 3 conservation areas, which would be the conservation focus areas. One is the Rivanna, and then the other one is
Northwest Albemarle.
Yeah.
Northwest. And then the other one is the Southwest Mountains, which
Right.
is
It's
so
huge.
far from the urban ring. I almost feel like it's a whole different category. So really, what do you think, Kim, about just the 2? Like, one focus would be the Rivanna corridor conservation area, and the other that Northwest area. And so, maybe we would do that, the Northwest area later in the summer. So it would just be, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think it could be fine. Let's focus on one at a time is what I guess.
Because it might be easier from like the advertising standpoint, then we could really focus on, we're going to try to get as many people out by advertising through all those HOAs and maybe gardening centers
In that area. Okay.
in that area. And we could have something really fun, like know your place, or you're in the Rivanna Conservation Corridor. Did you know you were? And then, perhaps we'll just really make that the focus for the spring. And I wonder if there's a way to then reach out, then do the other one for the Northwest area, and then do some of those. Now that you've learned about the BAP, if we can think about, or we could even have a list of what would you be interested in, have people, when they're done with the webinar, respond to like a Google form about what areas they're interested in learning more about. I don't know.
I don't think we need to get ahead of ourselves. I mean, I think we could also, it'll be a learning process for us too, to do this first one. And I think we can see how it works. I mean, and then decide how to tweak it to do it again in another area. So, I mean, I think that's fine to have that as a kind of a further off goal, but I don't think we need to start planning that until we got plenty on our plate if we're just going to do this. So let's focus on doing this, it seems to me.
One avenue also to spread the word about something, well, for this type of a webinar, is an organization. I'm sitting here Googling it. I'm going blank on the name. They, I don't know, Kim, if you remember, they hosted a webinar with Misty Bowes from Wild Virginia and Bridget Donaldson about the I-64 fencing project. And it's a group that's headquartered out of the Brooks Family YMCA. And it's some simple name like Friends or something, only it's not. And it's, I think primarily goes to like middle-aged senior citizen kind of people. And anyway, so those are people that have time, rather than someone with young kids, it's people that have time to invest in concepts like this and following through, and people who are interested in environmental protection. I would think, because this webinar was very highly attended. So, and I'll check. My husband knows the name too, if he can remember it. It's like such a simple name, we can't remember it. Do you know, Kim, what I'm talking about? Okay.
Well, that sounds great.
Yeah,
Well,
so they've got an extensive mailing list, is my point, within Charlottesville City.
And just really quick, there's one thing that I wouldn't have thought of is, but there was the South Fork Rivanna DEQ webinar. Were any of you on that? And anyway, the DEQ, they had those like pop-up polls in the Zoom that the participants can answer. And they were asking, about the best ways to reach you, especially during this pandemic. And one of the options was Nextdoor, which I don't even use, but my husband is on it. But I think a lot of people checked that, and I wouldn't have thought of that. So another thing to just note, I guess.
I think that's a great idea. I don't know how much it's used in Charlottesville, but in Crozet, just in Crozet, there are 17 different groups, Nextdoor groups.
Right.
With over 100 people in each one. So that's a lot.
Yeah. And so that's a good way to target certain areas potentially to get on those listservs.
well, so should our goal for before our next meeting is to get a date for a lunch and learn? How's that sound? And then once we have the date, then we can really work on reaching out and advertising and getting the word out.
I think we also need, obviously, before we get the word out, we need to really nail down, like, if I think it's great if we're going to talk about the BAP and expose people to that. But I agree with Michael that if we're trying to focus on like the Ravenna corridor, because we feel like people will have this sense of place, right? Like, oh, I'm part of this, which I think is great. That's going to have to come through in the talk too. Like that there is some focus on that particularly. And we need some sort of little write up to be done so that we can, when we get to the advertising phase, we have that, we can't contact the HOAs and say, hey, we have some, until we have that write up, until we've sort of come together with, these are the things we're going to talk about. Right. And here's the little write up that's supposed to get people excited about learning that. So I feel like we got to kind of nail that down and have that drafted and edited so that when we contact the HOAs and they're like, oh, sure, we're always happy to have something new, or next door, find somebody who's on the next door group who's willing to post it.
Yeah. So is there anybody who has an interest in looking over what Kim has created already in terms of the slide deck for the BAP, and thinking about how we make it really pertinent to the Rivanna corridor conservation area? Bruce?
Yeah.
Nice.
Put my name down.
All right.
Great. And I'd be glad to have, if we did want to do sort of keep the long-term vision of multiplying this in different areas, like I could do the initial part of it focused on what the committee is in the BAP, and then someone else could do the focus on that particular area, part of the discussion. And that would make it easier for me to do multiple ones, to sort of distribute that work a bit.
That sounds good. Well, Bruce, how about you and I could get together
Sure.
and we can look at that, what you have so far, Emily, and we can do some brainstorming and think about what to add. And I'll reach out to the Rivanna Conservation Alliance. If somebody has a suggestion of who I should talk to there about, telling them this is what we, sort of our vision of what we'd like to do, and see if they have some suggestions, or, if they'd like to partner with this. Yeah.
You could probably tap Lonnie. Lonnie probably knows those
That's a good
folks.
idea.
I was going to say, to the extent to which those groups also have some visual material that they might have available, that's also great to intersperse. So it's not just talking heads. We can actually have some pictures and show some stuff as part of this. I think that would be fun too.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds great. Material. All right. That sounds like we've got the outline of a plan here. And because we're going to finish up our meeting here pretty soon. I'm actually go back to this right here. Oh, I just want to show you something because I'm really I'm excited about it. Let's see, it's not this one. Oh, it's this right here. Because I just see so many people are just crazy about mowing their yards. So I found this field management guidelines for Virginia Grasslands, and it's really some really nice visual about birds and mowing. So I shared all this with you, but I just want to show it off because I'm excited about it. And so when we get to those big landowners, I want to get that in there and make our pitch first, changing the way you mow things. Actually, I did have a great conversation with somebody who lives over at Key West, and they were talking about that area near where people park to walk along there now down by the river. And there's this great grassy area. And she said, yeah, they just mowed it like 3 weeks ago. And she says, I'm going to talk to the people, we're going to see about changing it, and they're going to mow it in February because they only mow it once a year anyhow. So, maybe getting the word out, one person, one little small acreage at a time. But at any rate, that's my thing that I'm excited about.
And Christine, I did just in the last couple of days get, I don't know if you can see it doing this. I'd have to scan it to all. I got this flyer. Is it readable or is it backwards?
It's right.
It's good.
Okay. Okay. Do I have to mow all that? And it is homeowner's guide to like natural landscapes. And this was put together by the
Okay.
State Arboretum of Virginia, a Wildlife Conservancy, the Land Trust of Virginia, and PEC. And I think it's like from 2016, it looks like. And I was able to run it down and so I've got like a dozen copies of it. And it summarizes, I'd have to send you all a copy of it, I mean, unless, like I said, unless I scanned it. But that's why I was also asking about flyers, and if we did something live down the road, then people could pick up things like this. There's so many brochures and guides available. But what I liked about this one was it says, do I have to mow all that? How can I make a difference? Why choose native plants? Save a place for wildlife. The bad news, lawns cost you time, effort, and money. The good news, less is more. Plant with natural green. These are different sections. Create a butterfly and bird garden. Plant a tree. Remember, we were just talking about the tree commission in the county, or the city rather, and we don't do anything in the county about protecting trees, but we'd have a tree commission. Then there's a section about protect our water. And then there's a protection about lights, keep the night sky dark. So what I liked about it was it's just a little blurb. I don't know if I could, it's too light in here. There's just a little, like a little paragraph blurb on each of those sections. So it's a real easy thing for people to go, to catch their attention and get them thinking simple thoughts, which sometimes needed before they get into all the detail and some of the other guides. So just a thought. So I don't know how I can utilize this or get this to you guys unless I scan it.
Yeah.
Lee, do you,
Oh, go ahead, Michael.
yeah, I was just going to ask if you knew whether that's available online at all through the Arboretum folks.
Yeah, I was just thinking I should check, but I think I already checked before I actually contacted the Arboretum, and then yeah, actually I know I did. It was several weeks, it was a month ago. I contacted them, and then they actually got it from the Native Plant Society. And so I'm assuming that the Plant Society actually has the copies, but their office is at the Blandy Experimental Farm. So it's somehow between those two, but it took, calling a number of people and getting transferred and waiting for messages back and whatever. But I have a contact now.
Yeah, if you can get like permission to reproduce those or copies of that, I think that is great, because the other thing is we talked about is the possibility, and at Snow's Nursery, I did talk to them, and they said that I could come up, one day this spring, I could set up a table and greet their customers, and that would be a perfect thing to hand out.
It'd actually be great
We'll
for a
have-
lot of the nurseries to have.
Yeah,
But unless we have a budget and we're ready to move forward, I don't want to bother about asking rights for reprinting. I mean, somebody might want to update something, it's going to likely start a process.
Yeah,
I
found it.
Yeah, I'll contact.
I found it online. I put it in the chat.
Oh, good for you.
Great.
all right, wonderful. Well, I'm going to close this meeting unless anybody's got any more thoughts. No. Well, if not, I want to thank you so much for a great year and all of your efforts, and wishing you guys a really great holiday. And I hope it's wonderful. Hope you get out to enjoy the Saturn and Jupiter out in the night sky very soon. And thank you. I'm going to write up what I can remember of our conversation and put them in the notes so we can remember them, and we'll report out to the rest of the committee in January. So thank you. Thank you to Carolyn. Enjoy those grandbabies.
Thank you, I am.
Thank you, Carolyn.
You're
Yeah, thank
welcome.
you.
All right.
Have a great
you guys
holiday, everyone.
Great
Hey,
holidays to all.
Everyone have
Yeah.
happy holidays.
so
Take
much.
care.
Take care,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
All right.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Bye.